they will do that. But most times, what we encourage in EcoDisco is, if you have any disagreement, come, let's talk. Now, the good thing about the privatization is that you have a lot more people you can call on to bring about order and sanity in the system. In those days, if you had a problem, you didn't even know where to go to. But now there are directors, there are senior management, the numbers are freely available. We have a complaints center. You just call if you have a problem. And if they call me, for example, I immediately call somebody up. XYZ has a problem. Go see, reconcile. And at times I encourage, make a good faith payment. Make a good faith payment whilst we sort out the issue of the disputed areas and find a compromise.
Well, what are these kinds of meters we've started seeing in some places around Lagos? So they put them on maybe poles,
yes,
or some on high-rise buildings on the wall. Those are smart meters. And you have
and one of the ways
more than 4 or 5 just like populated on the board.
Exactly, and then within each of those,
you can get access to them.
You can't gain access to them, and secondly, in each, they come in receptacles where you can connect so many consumers. So you do not, even if you manage to get access to them, you do not really know who you are going to connect or disconnect.
Because
unlike before.
We started seeing them around crowded areas.
Yeah. Most of this going on in the eco distribution zone. We're doing trial runs with them, and they've proved very useful. You won't be amazed, and in some districts.
Oh, are those the meters hanging on the poles?
Yes, some of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that they are recharged through their phones or devices?
First of all, in your home, what you then have would be what you call a dummy meter, which just really shows, but you can't do anything with it. You can't, it's a waste of time trying to get anyone to go and fix the wire and all that. That's not the real meter. It's more like a counter. That's what you do. But the real meter is stored away from your reach, and we do them in clusters. Mm-hmm. So even if you manage to get somebody to go do it, you're not quite sure whose house you are connecting or disconnecting or reconnecting. So it only requires an expert that can do that. So that's one of the ways. Those are one of the ways we're trying to...
How smart are those smart meters?
Pretty smart from what we know. There's nothing that's absolutely foolproof, but pretty smart, much better than the prepaid meters.
You know, speaking about the country getting uninterrupted power supply, if you could hazard a guess, I mean, how far away are we from achieving that objective?
Well, in the first place, you need to fix, we depend a lot on thermal power, and thermal power feeds on gas. Your gas infrastructure needs to be, we are at least 5 years behind. If we meet up all the bills or whatever we need to do, we still need to lay the pipelines, all the infrastructure that can feed you gas to the point where you can say, okay, these thermal plants will fire day in, day out. And that's really because of, as I told you, the subsidy regime we had in the past, which simply couldn't carry the cost. So you had this, even as we speak now, the goodwill this government enjoys is what's making the gas people supply. There are still issues to do with funding. And even when they get the Naira funding, they still need the FX to support what they are doing. But that's going to take a while. And the only way the government can sort of release that pressure on itself is to allow for international pricing to rule it. The initial fear is prices will go up. Prices will go up initially. It happened with telecoms. But then it also encourages competition in the sector. Once competition comes in, prices will begin to adjust themselves.
You know how governments
happened in telecoms.
To deal with the price going up. I mean, people were more than overjoyed to have their phones in their hands, and perhaps didn't bother too much about the pricing, especially since they could control what it was that they were consuming. But when it comes to electricity that they have been receiving for a while, sometimes on a steady basis, and then all of a sudden the price jumps up perhaps 3 times. Only God knows how much it's going to cost. This would be very difficult for a lot of people to accept.
But if you don't get the pricing structure right, you will never get funding for the sector. go do any feasibility study. Any bank that wants to give you money, any lending agency, they would look.
Are the discos themselves also conducting polls to see, you know, what people will be willing to accept and perhaps push it to government?
Oh yes, incidentally, before the last NEC left, that was where we had got ourselves to. We had gotten ourselves to the point where we all agreed that in the first place we should do what we call cost reflective tariffs, because right now, as I said, there's paucity in the entire industry. So NEC agreed to that. The next thing would be, okay, willing buyer, willing consumer. You can go negotiate, and if I can convince you, I'll give you power, steady, and you are willing to pay a certain sum of money. So what's the problem? Why should a third party intervene?
And we don't mean in those estates in Lekki. We're talking about, you know, the average house.
No,
you know,
I'm talking about.
Are those the areas that Ecodisco is looking at?
No, we
doesn't get emotional.
No, we do. You're kidding yourself. We get across. We get across everywhere. But let me just tell you.
Mr. Etomi, I think he's right. There's so many places. When we get mails, some of these places, for instance, someone is saying something about Barua inside that they shed the light. You know, the electricity, they have days off, days on, and they're not bothered about that if only they have the meters. And if you look at those areas around Mushi and some couple of other places where they've even had issues, altercation between members of staff of the discos and the communities, if only they had done that, for instance, the smart meter, we just so you put them up there on the pole.
Do you know? Yeah, we're going to get to that. But do you know the practical issues we face when we go to some of these areas? Because of the years of, let me say, bad habits, we actually have a secondary, they call them NEPA 2, whatever you call them, a secondary market that's going on. So you deal with lords of the manor in those areas. So if you do not appease them, you don't have access to some of those areas. We're still talking to some of them. It came up again in the meeting we had with the Deputy Governor of Lagos State under the advisory, how we can tackle some of these areas. Because some of them, some areas, you have forward-looking leadership in the area who see what we want to do, work with us. But in some other areas, you just draw a blank. And those are the areas where they molest our workers. They go, they disconnect, they reconnect, you go back, they beat you up, and stuff like that. So essentially, those are almost lost areas. So when it comes to supply, they're not giving priority. Rather give priority, we're in a business to make sure that at least you survive. So I'll give priority to those who are willing to pay. So again, part of educating ourselves is that those old habits must give way to responsible consumption habits. A lot of those cobweb connections were not our connections. They were connections done illegally and creating confusion. And some people actually collecting tariffs for them. But it's not coming to the discos.
Are we getting more investors, locally or otherwise, in that sector?
Yes. In fact, you started with the question, if you get the sector right, so many other things will fall into place. Yes, there's so much interest, and there are so many facets to it. Look at embedded generation, for example. All we're talking about at this point is grid power. You produce, you give to the central grid, they give to us. But many of the discos, especially Lagos, the need for power in Lagos is phenomenally high. In fact, the entire national consumption can be taken by Lagos. But today we get only a quarter of what's totally produced. So we convinced NEC that they should allow some of us go source for power directly, even if it's premium power. And we're working on that embedded generation program. It's embedded because when you produce it, you feed it directly to the discos, as opposed to sending it to the grid, and then it is then transmitted back to us. Now, in Ecodisco, we have, waiting for approval, close to 500 megawatts of additional power that can come on the embedded platform once we get NEC to sign off on it. Now, to put it in perspective, we probably get between 500 and 600 today from the grid. So that means we can almost instantly double power supply to our network. Once that happens, The only issue we're having now is the pricing. And we're asking NEC, allow us deal with customers who are willing to take. And there's so many customers who are willing to take power if you pay for it, if they can get steady supply. Do you know what it would mean, retiring your generator or making it strictly standby? For many people, it's a no-brainer. And that's why I said there are estates. They pay 16 naira, 17 naira. As long as I don't have to wake up in the morning, run for diesel, whatever, they switch off when they're going, they come back, they still control. You can plan around it. That's where we want to get to.
Is that talk true that those who import generators may not exactly be happy, and so...
Oh no, they will not be happy, clearly. It only stands to reason. There's a business that's been going on for God knows how many, 40 years, and then you find that steady power supply will retire. You fight. It's natural. Every business will try and fight for that, because what we spend on generating power is obscene. You just need to go. I don't know of any Nigerian business, or in fact home, that does not have one type of generator or the other. Can you imagine if you combine that generating power, you can supply the whole of Africa. It's just that it's disjointed, it's disorganized, and all that. But then the pollution costs, we're not even looking at it.
Does it also say anything about the kind of people?
I mean, it's massive. Sorry?
Does it say anything about the kind of people we are? Because I sometimes wonder if someone has such a massive generator, perhaps they could share power.
I know. I know.
It means we're always looking for solutions.
Oh yes, that's why we all have, each of us has a borehole. We're all neighbors, but we each all have boreholes. But I can't talk about one communal thing.
All right, thank you for coming on this morning, Judge Etomi, talking about the economy, how we need to fix the power sector. Well, we'll have another matter to focus on here today, but that will be in a moment. Don't go away.